The Spin-off Podcast Network.
This is Kiwi is back for a brand new season with more inspiring kōrero from special guests including rugby player, father and role model TJ Perenara.
My family bring me joy. Rugby brings me joy too, but it's not the same joy as my family brings me.
And global dancer and choreographer Kirsten Dodgen.
For some reason, people think I'm very intimidating.
Listen to the new season of This is Kiwi, brought to you by the Spin-off Podcast Network in collaboration with KiwiBank. Available now wherever you get your podcasts.
Talofa lava. I'm Madeline Chapman, editor at The Spin-off. If you have the means, consider supporting our high-quality journalism by becoming a Spin-off member. Sign up now at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
Well, kia ora, Queens, and welcome to RuPaul's Drag Race Down Under the Covers, a special edition of the Real Pod podcast with me, Eli. Don't laugh yet, Rhys, because we haven't introduced you.
You don't exist yet. Oi, oi, oi. I love it. And I'm here too. It's me, Chris Parker, but I'm actually in a different city to Eli right now. This feels like breaking news, but really, we're just recapping a reality TV show.
It's right. Also, everyone has a legit podcast mic. We look like we're, I don't know, watch what happened live, or I don't know, what's a good podcast? Is that a podcast? No.
No.
Oh my God.
Something like the daily. It looks like we're doing the daily or something. We're like, just everyone get to a podcast booth immediately.
Yeah,
we need to recap
this. And we are very impressed with ourselves that we managed to lock in a very good guest, the one and only Judge Graham Norton and Alan Carr combined into one person, Rhys
or
Santino.
Or Santino. Hi, Rhys. How are you?
Hello. Hi, boys.
Kia ora, Queens.
Aussie, oi, oi, oi. What a turnaround. By the way, let me just very quickly say, as we were recording that, every time Rue would say that, it was, I think they cut out a lot of them, but I laugh every time. Every single time. Because it is the most bizarre thing I've ever seen in my life, is RuPaul Charles going, Aussie.
She has the most, craziest inflections on some sentences. I still in my brain have, when she reviews the movie Rurangi from last week, I still think about it all the time when she goes, it is witty and moving. I love it. I think about it all the time.
Chris just sent me that as a voice message out of the blue a couple of days ago.
And I gotta say though, it's how she talks. And it's and you kind of get into a rhythm of it. It's like being friends with Liza Minnelli. You're just like, well, this is just the rhythm that you talk in, and I really love it.
She's actually so good at her job, though. Everything is so clean, and if I was to host something, I'd be like, well, I just want to, I don't know, it'd be little bits and bobs where she just delivers these full power sentences. It's she knows what she's doing,
And when she talks, it feels like it's going to be important. When she was to et cetera, in this episode, when she was like, piss was just a little bit too far. I was like, whoa, it really was.
So we are here to recap the full episode that you've all just watched. And we're just going to dive into it and give our hot takes because, yes, we all need another opinion on this show.
Yes, and I will just be wandering through no man's land of minds in a way to keep my job.
And we're going to trick you into saying something to get you fired.
It's going to be amazing because if anything here, we just have a hot take from someone who was in the room while it all happens, and we get a little bit a peep behind the curtain, hopefully, or maybe not. Depends how tight those contracts are.
Are you finding your opinions on what happened in the episodes shifting watching it back? Because you don't see the workroom and stuff when you're in there.
Yes, because I usually don't watch things with me I might watch them once and be like, well, that's enough. But I am able to kind of watch it because I have no idea what happened in the workroom. We almost kind of purposely don't want to know. So you can purely watch it on what's happening on the main stage. And there's so much that starts to make sense. You're like, oh yeah, they seemed furious at each other that day and I have no idea why.
It's such an interesting thought because it's you get to know so much of the Queen by what you see in the workroom, but you get to see them for how long on the runway? It feels like 10 minutes. I'm surprised you barely know their names.
It is kind of as it is on the show. I was expecting, the thing I've been saying in interviews is and I do believe this though, is when I got the job, I was like, I hope people that work in fast food tend not to eat fast food because they know how it's been made. And I was worried that like, what if this is McDonald's? And I thought, this is all going to be fake and bullshit. And then I got there and it was like, because as a fan of the show as well, like I've been a fan of the show for like a decade, I just expected there's a certain amount of producing. And I feel like when I say things like this, it sounds like I'm like towing the party line. But it truly is like, so not as produced as I thought it was. And everything real is real. Like the amount of, look, the workroom is probably like every show, like every reality show that produces like prod things. But like being in the room for a lip sync battle or like for lip sync for your life or being in the room when, things kick off, it's like, it's hard as a fan to not be like, God, this is good television. Like when Art went, they've edited that down. When Art went, she was so emotional on the runway. And like the three of us were kind of like, I was tearing up. Like it was quite brutal to watch. And then, but even afterwards, and you go back to your trailer and you're like, this is grim, but I'm going to watch the shit out of this episode and really relish it. And, knowing that she was going to come back, I didn't know. I didn't know until I got to work that day that she was coming back that day. And so I got told by a producer and he teased me about it for the rest of the filming. I squealed. I was like, what? Wow! And just clenched every part of my body. I was like, this is amazing.
It was good to have her back as well because, there was a lot of hot takes on her arrival back. But, we're back into a reading challenge this episode. And you're just like, you're so grateful to have queens who can read when there's a reading challenge happening. Because you want
the et cetera read. Oh my God.
Like perfection.
Perfect. Because it's like, as soon as you hear a queen or just anyone start a joke about pronouns, you're like, oh no.
I know.
We haven't always been the most inclusive community about just pronouns generally. And oh no. And then perfect joke.
But
that's the thing, right? Where people argue that you're like, oh, you can't joke about anything in these days. It's like, you can if you're smart enough. You can do a
and you
good
can
joke about
if you're
pronouns.
gay, all right? Because if you're gay, we can say whatever we want.
Three gays can say whatever we want. I thought the read on Electra about her taste was so good.
Because I think we don't really. We're like a catty. Look, even at the start of the series, there was a lot of the chatter was about how bitchy everyone was. But I think that's just what we're like. But we're not necessarily reading is fundamental, but it's not as much. It's that kind of Paris is Burning style of drag. I don't think it is as deeply Australian. So I think they really, kicked that in the dick, really, I think.
Yeah, we don't... it's we don't really have, a reading culture. So we are just kind of, mean to each other.
Yes, yeah.
And we've got that dry humour that... And also, which I think is an interesting thing I've been sort of watching develop on the show, is, the Americans beginning to understand, self-deprecating humour, which they don't have a concept of, but Electra being I have terrible taste and kind of admitting that, and you can say them being why would you show your weakness so openly like that? But it's they don't understand that in New Zealand, if you can kind of admit that you're a bit rubbish or something, or I don't know, it's that tall poppy syndrome thing. We just like to keep ourselves humble so that we seem more relatable or something.
Which is why I think the queens that have done really well over here from the American people like Trixie and Katya and I don't know, just the ones that kind of are really self-deprecating. Jinx is kind of similar to that. And I think we've all probably had situations where I feel like this is a broad generalization, but American comedy, everyone wins in their jokes, and in Australian and New Zealand comedy, we all lose in our jokes. The joke is always well, I wish I had have said that, but I didn't. And American jokes always end with and I said this, and the audience all claps.
Yes. Okay, so who are our favourites of the reading challenge? Because I really enjoyed. I don't necessarily like, I don't care if the whole run of their reads are amazing, as long as I hear a joke that, like, surprises me and delights me and doesn't sort of sound like reads from previous challenges. But that's just coming purely from someone who's watched too much reality TV now. And, sort of like, I'm like, you need to shock me for me to laugh. But I really enjoyed Keita's reads in the challenge. I thought there was some fun play around what she was doing that was sort of surprising, and I also loved Art as well. I thought she just did a great job.
I thought both of those reads felt really
takes?
specific to who they were talking about as well, because I think probably the thing that queens do before they go is write a bunch of generic reads for a skinny queen or a bigger queen, or this is for this person, this is for this person. But all those four from Keita and Art felt like super specific to who they were talking to, and that was it.
And I feel like I'm also like a sucker for, as a fan of the show, watching it, like, if a queen doesn't do that well, but you also are like, oh, like you know, you aren't a bitchy queen, but you're really trying. Like, what I don't like is when queens are like, well, I'm gonna be a cunt, like, do you know, like, and just really burn someone down. And you're like, Jesus Christ. Whereas, like, I don't know, someone like Maxi, who's just this ball of sweetness. And, you know, she didn't absolutely slam it to death, but you're just like, I love you so much. And you know what? This was close. It was close.
Yeah, it was almost there. Yeah. How do they prep for a reading challenge? I've never really thought about it, because you'd need to know you just sort of have to start building up your jokes as you went along in the competition. Like, I need to know how they prep those, because they need to be so specific, and they are just like actually crafted jokes. Like, that's basically what a read is. It's like
it's a roast. It's like doing a roast.
Yeah, it's quite a big ask.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I think similar to similar to the main stage challenge. It's not always something I've noticed it happens with open mic comedians as well, but like it's a tone shift. Like, what happens at 2:00 in the morning at a gay bar when everyone's coming down off their K, and you're like screaming at people, doesn't necessarily work in a cold studio in front of 5 people in RuPaul. Do you know what I mean? Like, it always seems to happen in the comedy challenges as well. They come out really hot, and you're just like, oh, no, it's 4:00 in the afternoon, and this is a theatre audience. And I think that happens in the reading challenge sometimes. You're like, you're so fat and you should burn in hell. You're like, oh, okay.
No, the Utica vibe.
That was sort of the tone of this whole episode in a way, because then we dive into like an acting challenge, so kind of the first acting challenge of the season, and it's actually a great challenge for drag queens, because I always feel like the acting challenges should somewhat reflect a job that they might do in the real world. And sometimes you're like, well, they're never going to be in this like Dreamgirls musical or whatever, you know, like. But I like it in an infomercial. yeah. I learned to sell a phone plan.
There is a drag queen show on at the West End at the moment. What's it called?
Right.
It's happening. It
does happen.
Anyways, doesn't matter. Bianca, someone's on the West End at the moment. There's like Latrice and
Willem, I think, on the West End, maybe.
Yeah.
Didn't they just open last year, like just before COVID, and then they got like 3 shows and then they close it?
Yeah.
Anyway,
but it was a different lineup. And so then they just like shipped in some new ones.
So who's been vaxxed? So it's an infomercial challenge, which I enjoy, because, you know, I'm like, I feel like it's a great challenge for drag queens. They've got to make their own products as well. They've got to sell them. You get to see a bit of their writing. You get to see some of their acting. But the true delight for me of this whole challenge, honestly, is Suzanne
Paul.
She had me in stitches.
She's
like, she
so
was
good.
It was just so funny watching someone who, honestly, I don't think has watched an episode of Drag Race, and honestly has not. I don't think we've seen many drag queens. Like, she would just keep gasping out of shock as to what they were saying, and it just was like. But there's something so inherently camp about Suzanne Paul as well that I was like, you could try. Like, it almost made the queen seem like drier, because there was this like beacon of campness in that studio, and you've got kind of Suzanne Paul with all her eyeshadow on, and then suddenly these queens were sort of like, I don't know, trying to do their campery, but it sort of paled in comparison to Suzanne Paul just kind of sitting there and gasping at the horrible things that they were saying.
Well, good. I've always just thought there's something inherently camp about just trying to sell something. Like, I've never watched an infomercial and felt straight.
No
Do you
one's
know
actually
what I
a
mean?
normal
Never-
person on an infomercial.
A straight man has never bought an infomercial product. It's always it's a woman or a gay man. It's like no one.
I have a question. Karen seemed very excited to meet Suzanne Paul, but to me, is she on Australian TV? Or
I have a feeling, like I was aware. I didn't know. I'll be honest. Like absolute honesty, I did not know the name. But when I saw her, I was like, yeah, like she must be like the. And look, we're all performers. We're all unemployed. We've all spent a lot of time watching daytime television. I'm sure we've seen it. She has. What is it with infomercial people and being English? There's like very few famous non-English ones.
It was definitely interesting seeing the Australian queens have absolutely no idea who she is.
No.
But she's, it's like she's like such a hallmark of New Zealand like culture, I guess. And Eli was saying it was surprising that no one kind of did her for Snatch Game.
Snatch Game.
such a big.
But then again, you had her in real life in the studio, and still like Michelle was like, "Who's this woman?"
I mean, Snatch Game had gone so well with such very famous people. So I wonder how it would have gone with not as famous people.
Amazing to see Scarlett do Jennifer Coolidge again in the ad. She
my
sort of
God.
brought back her terrible Jennifer Coolidge impression.
And I'll be
Bring it out
honest,
again.
I had said something about that, and they didn't put it in. This is the interesting thing for me as well, of like seeing the edit of what we say as well. And this isn't giving anything away, but like I think I even said once the queens were gone, because as the show was going on, I was learning not how to be a judge, but like how to, you say one thing when they're there, and then you'd be a little bit harsher when they're gone. Like you learn the rhythm of like, and just was kind of like, yeah, like it wasn't great the first time. So why are we doing it this time?
Bring it back for another spin.
Like,
Wild.
did you buy this impression and you're like trying to get the money's worth out of it? Is this an NFT? What does it mean? I don't know what an NFT is.
It seemed like Michelle was honestly hating her day in the recording studio while they were filming. She's like, every person came in, she was like, no. Like, she just looked so unenthused, so over it. It's like, give the woman an LMP. Like, she needs, like, she's clearly...
She loved LP so much.
So
I did
good.
feel like Michelle and Suzanne were getting along like a house on fire, though, as much as they weren't enjoying so much of the Queen stuff.
She was obsessed with her.
Yeah.
She was like... Because sometimes Michelle would be on days that I wasn't in, so to do that kind of stuff. And I'd come in, like, poke my head into her dressing room and be like, how was that? And she was like... She was, like, obsessed with... Because I think this is the thing, and I'm not just saying this to, like, suck Michelle's dick, but she is one of those, like, similar kind of vibes, I think, of, like, just a very professional, takes her job very seriously.
Oh, yeah.
Is not... Like, for someone who has a book called Diva Rules, is kind of not. And I think, like, there's something, like, when you meet two very good TV professionals that aren't necessarily, like, they don't work in live necessarily, but, like, there's I don't know how Suzanne Paul does that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that would drive me insane, what her job is. But she's very, do you know what I mean? Like,
Oh, yeah.
Did you know, Rhys, she entered the Raw Comedy Quest maybe 4 or 5 years ago? Made it to the
Oh my
final.
God.
Was on the news. Just a little tidbit.
it was on the news.
It was on the news, yeah.
Wow.
She's just always
Busy
around.
news
like,
day in New Zealand.
I wasn't
Always is.
surprised to see her in Drag Race. I was like, of course she's here. Like, she's just always there, ready when you need her. Like, I think she's done, like, Dancing with the Stars. She's done Treasure Island. She's done RuPaul's Drag. Like, she's an icon. Okay, so then the runway challenge was, I've, like, absolutely forgotten. What was it? Oh, Sheila in the Bush.
Sheila in the Bush?
Let's take a quick little break and hear from some ads from people who'd love you to buy their products.
Oh, is it Suzanne Paul?
Yeah.
Kia ora, Justin Giovanetti here, and I'm the political editor at The Spinoff. This podcast, like so much of the work we do at The Spinoff, is made possible by the support of our members. To find out more about The Spinoff members and how you can help us keep producing quality, independent journalism, visit members.thespinoff.co.nz and do it today.
Kia ora, I'm Sophie.
And I'm Simon.
And I'm Alice, and together we host the Spinoff's food podcast, Dietary Requirements.
Join us each month as we explore a vast culinary landscape, From the gourmet
Ooh la la.
to your more hearty tucker,
Kiwi onion dip, anyone?
everything's on the table in dietary requirements.
Subscribe wherever you listen to all your other favourite podcasts.
So here we are on the main stage right now of RuPaul's Drag Race. I mean, not us literally, but close your eyes, imagine if you want to.
One of us was there.
Rhys was there.
I was.
Tell me like 2 or 3 things about the vibe in that room. Like, I want to know the temperature. I want to know the volume of the music.
Oh my God.
I want to know how big it is.
It's so cold. Like there was a this is the most boring behind the scenes tea in the world. But there was a man whose job it was. They brought in a powerful enough air conditioner to get it to be cold enough in there. Like Ru has this whole thing about, and there's a thermometer to make sure it's, I forget what the temperature is, but it is freezing in there. And part of it is because the girls are standing there for hours at a time, like, you know, within the studio. It's like, you know, I've always thought, like, on shows like MasterChef, the food, by the time they're eating it, must be cold and shit. And because by the hours, like, it's kind of, you know, once you put on drag, you've got to stay fresh. And it is the most, I quite enjoyed it, because, like, I'm usually in suits and an inch of makeup and stuff. And Ru, like, it just freezes you and you don't melt. So that's boring.
I absolutely love the idea that it's cold in there. I'm just like,
shivering.
Anything that lets me know what it's like in that room. And it's quite a small studio, right? Because, I mean, here's the thing. I feel like there's been a lot of critique on the production of this show in terms of, like, just the Twitter audience who, you know, they hate everything and nothing's good enough for them. And
imagine like, still being on Twitter.
I'm just like, they created this in a pandemic. Like, what more do you want? Like, you still got your drag race in the midst of a full pandemic, and there's like, it's still not, they're like, oh, the studio looks a bit small, and you're like, yeah, because we're in a pandemic.
And it's like, yeah, it was made quite quickly, and the fact of how quickly it was made, I think, because I'm staying out of that, like, I'm not replying to people. In fact, on the last day of filming, the last thing Ru said to the top queens, and I think partly to me, was, you're going to change lives, blah, 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 and stay out of the fucking comments. Just don't reply to anyone because everyone thinks they're an expert. And then she got up and she walked out.
Wow.
And, got onto a chariot and she flew up into the sky like the end of Greece.
Made 4 more
seasons
of
true, though.
It is all of that. Like, it is like, and it's just, I just love that it's that kind of interesting kind of fandom that, look, to be honest, I've probably been a part of it at some point in the last decade. Like, I've definitely bitched about things about the show that now we're making it, I'm like, oh, that, like, it is really hard. Like, and things happen in the room that might seem different on camera, but things made sense in the room. Nothing happens in the room that doesn't make sense. There's nothing overly produced. Do you know what I mean?
But you would never critique, say, like, Real Housewives to this level, you know, like, you would never critique, like, I mean, I guess, or Project Runway. It's like, but because I guess we know how much it can impact the drag queens' careers. Like,
absolutely,
it turns them from, like, being, you know, these hardworking performers at, like, bars and nightclubs and doing, like, drag brunch to, like, being able to tour the world and release singles and be on TV and stuff. Like, it has a major impact on them.
It is, and it's the only mechanism to do that. Like, as in it, that exists in the world at the moment. It's the only thing that you can be a working drag queen and then suddenly be a TV presenter 5 months later. Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, it's like, it's exactly right. That is like, we, as an audience, I guess they understand the importance and value of it, so that when we see things go wrong, we're like, oh, how dare they? But then I feel like that has just slipped out of it. It's gone beyond that now, to now just having just that reaction about anything on the show and not understanding kind of what that's connected to. Like, we just freak out if someone's like, I don't know, wore the same wig twice, and we just have had enough. You know, they're like, how dare they be on this show? And it's like, well, it's just reality TV, and they're just doing drag, you know. But
it's
the expectation on the queen has changed so much as well. They used to be able to be just good at their one thing, like Bianca Del Rio wearing the same dress every week for 12 weeks, and now it's like you need to be as funny as her, but also be wearing Alexander McQueen every week, basically.
Yeah.
I know. And I would argue as well that it's not necessarily there's the whole thing of how expensive drag is. Like, I don't know if that's necessarily the show perpetuating that. I don't think. Like, after being in there, I think the show demands an elevation. That's the word we always used to use. The word elevation comes up a lot. But I think it is the fan base that has created this, like, this needs to look like this, and this needs to look like this, and this needs to look like this. Because it is this kind of, I don't know, it sometimes feels like when you read things, it feels as if we've made the show in spite of them, as opposed to for them. Like, it's like we're not making the show as a protest. We worked really hard on this.
And I think
a bunch of people are being given a shot to be stars, and your only job appears to be to tell them they're not stars before they become stars.
It's interesting because I feel like, of all, and it's kind of amazing that she's on the show, and I kind of think about it a lot, but Electra kind of embodies, like, for me, like, early seasons of Drag Race, in a way.
Yes.
Like, and that girl won this week's episode off, like, some sheets and a painted head. And I was like, yes.
I loved
yes,
it.
go off. Like, you deserved it. You walked down the runway. I was like, amazing. Her acting challenge was just like clean, beautiful, like just a great product. It wasn't crass. Like, it was still like draggy. Like, she's still kind of sucking someone off and, all that kind of stuff. But it was just like really well. I just like, man, that's well crafted. And it was like, I was just like, this is like quintessential Drag Race to me. And I just loved seeing her win and take it out. And I was like, oh, this is so good.
I was impressed with Electra because she did, like, there were some crass jokes, but they were about being a gay man, really, whereas so many of the other crass jokes were, like, about vaginas. And it's like, no, that's not really your lame way to talk about, Scarlett.
And I think that's what a lot of the critiques were about. Like, when we talk about how crass it was, because there were times, and the three of us all know each other pretty well. I am filth. Like, I love the most dirty thing. But it can't be like what I said earlier about if it's easy, it's not funny. Like, it needs to be kind of like, you need to be able to have to do some maths to get to the thing. And I think that's what was great about Electra's infomercial. Like, it was like almost stand-up-y kind of funny. Like, they would set up and punchline. It wasn't like, whereas someone like Maxi or Arts were like, you almost had to do too much maths by that point. You're like, you're more going for a vibe here as opposed to set up punchline.
And I feel like with Electra, we're really getting to see her as a drag artist. Like, you get to see, like, you really feel like she's put her looks together, whereas it's that thing of just being like, and when we're talking to other drag queens about it, being like, you're kind of watching a drag queen walk down the look that they have come up with but haven't necessarily constructed. And not that every queen should have to do that, but it's like, that's why I love those construction challenges on the show, because you really get to see like how they put their drag together, which is so much of the art form. And so I just like, I'm so happy for Electra, and I just thought it was such a good episode for her.
I felt a little bit.
I think you're so. So I was just good. All I was going to say is I think you're so astute about, like, it did feel like kind of even, and I know we'll get to it, but even the lip sync felt like a kind of early seasons of drag kind of lip sync. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, there is kind of like an old school, new school kind of battle, and I think that's what those lip syncs are about. Like, this kind of, like, my favorite type of lip sync is when it's two very different queens battling it out. It's like, and that, it's tougher. And anyways, I'm just rambling.
So I
just love the show.
Let's just go into 2 points before we kind of wrap up, because we're going to talk to the eliminated queen as well. Eli, I know, get all the goss. So I think that we have to address the kind of elephant in the room there, which is Scarlett Adams being called out in the episode. One, in the workroom, it sort of comes up in conversation, and then two, it kind of happens with Rue on the main stage. And it's kind of, for me, the first time I've seen something happen in the outside world be addressed inside the vacuum that is Drag Race. But obviously, to appropriate someone's culture, or to be like, or racistly kind of like embody and mock other people's cultures like that, it just has to be addressed at that level.
Absolutely.
And it's an interesting moment of just like watching how Rue wants to deal with that. I mean, obviously we we can't really weigh in on whether or not like Scarlett's
No, I think we're exactly the group that should do it.
But I'm just kind of watching as in terms of just someone who's kind of watching it play out on TV. You know, it's like you can see that Rue sort of uses this as an opportunity to sort of educate or speak to something bigger to her audience, which is about like the idea of call out versus call in, I guess. And it's a moment that she doesn't just sort of put Scarlett's head on the chopping block, but she decides to kind of use this as an opportunity for Scarlett to sort of grow through. I think there's definitely been like harsher critiques, or firmer is probably the word, firmer critiques online about it. And I guess it's that thing as well of like looking back in a moment and going how you would do it differently versus being in that moment, but also however Rue wants to deal with it. Like, who am I to say anything?
Exactly.
You know?
This is my point of view. Like, I've been getting a little bit of, and I'll be honest, I'm not going to talk too much about it because it's like, again, like what you just said, like it, but it is Rue's decision. Everything on that show is Rue's decision. Like, it's in, you know, it's not like, and I think she is the one to be making that decision on that panel as well. And she's the only one that should be. And there's an interesting thing that happens sometimes, I think, that, you know, Rue is obviously a person of colour and a kind of queer icon. And I think to flat out cancel Scarlett, like, what's the more useful thing? Is to completely cancel someone and remove them in this situation from show business and the world, or to force someone to reckon with it, and you know what I mean? Like there's like and then kind of hopefully move forward through it, and there's like a making themselves better type of story, as opposed to, well, goodbye and we'll never hear from you again.
But also, I'm sure Rue understands, like, Rue's done like what is a kind of, you know, like I've never seen something like this happen on Drag Race before, and it's like she's addressed it in the show. So this other stuff used to be like, you know, I mean, it was truth, but it was like hearsay. It was like gossip online versus like, oh no, this has happened now. Like, and so in a way, like, she's gonna have to, like, Scarlett will always be associated to, and so she should be, like, what has happened, and she will always be linked to that, as she should be, that, because, you know, it got brought up in this show. So in a way, like, it's like she's never going to be able to escape from it, and she's going to have to constantly work through it.
It's a reckoning. She has to reckon with it for the rest of her life.
But it's a shock. I mean, it's a shockingly like large amount of like appropriation and like a sort of racist bullying. So I feel like the amount of kind of critique that's coming her way, like it is fair, and so it's all valid. So you know, I mean, I'm still just like, I was kind of watching it being like, this is, yeah, you're right. Like, this is like a black icon, queer icon, who also having to have this conversation. Like, and there's a part of me that's like, I wonder if there is a part of Rue that, like, you know, because she just seems so impenetrable, like, as this force of strength. But I was like, she still has to kind of have this conversation, which is just like so unfortunate and definitely painful to be like, one, much older than someone and already know so much better in terms of behavior.
Absolutely.
And they'd be like, you can't do that.
People talk about
Rue,
be like, just showing up and doing a job and not really being involved in the show, but it's like, she was involved in the show. That moment really showed how connected she is to this queen.
Yeah, I think there is that kind of interesting storyline of that she's this ethereal thing that kind of floats into the room and then floats out. And it's like, no, she's there for hours. Like, my call time, this is just boring admin things, but my call time was like usually about 10 a.m. Her call time was 6, and that's how long she would take to get together. She's like producing the show. She's like deciding things as we're going. She's like, this was the most bizarre thing for me, is she directs it, essentially. Like, kind of sitting in the room, like, obviously there is also a director, and I don't want to take that away from the director, but
no, they did nothing.
She's in the room kind of going, okay, girls, you stand over there, let's get the camera there, like, as in just, she is the vision of the show, if that makes sense. And so I think it's, when things like this come up in, whether it be this franchise or any of the franchises, I feel like it is her prerogative. Like, is it, and, you know, moving away slightly from that is like any of the, like what I was saying about it being in spite of people. There's an interesting thing I think that's happened to Rue because he's so famous and so kind of iconic. You kind of have stopped thinking about him as a queer person of colour.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
100%.
Like, as in, he's still existing in the world as a queer person of colour. So there is a point of view that he has that I don't have, that a lot of us don't have. And I don't know.
So then we end up with... No, I think it's valid. Like, I think, you know, you it's so easy to detach the past experiences or the feelings from these, like, mega stars and the fact that they have to kind of navigate those moments as well. So moving forward now, we are watching Maxi and et cetera, et cetera. Oh, no, yeah, et cetera, et cetera. Lip sync for their lives. I guess I was a little... I mean, I think it could have been anyone lip syncing.
Yeah, I think Karen or
kind of,
or Scarlett could have been in the bottom as well.
Yeah,
which is, we sort of had that a few weeks ago as well. So I'm a bit like, I guess, shocked to see et cetera be lip syncing, but also like not surprised as well. Like it could have been any of them. They were all as crass as each other. I think maybe Scarlett was a little bit more crass and maybe deserved to be in the bottom even more. And I feel like maybe that was just some choices that Rue wanted to make in terms of what she had to address earlier or something.
Well, the Priscilla look maybe lifted her out as well.
The Priscilla look kind of lifted it up, and it was cool to see that on the and that kind of silver, like, honestly flew like perfectly. It felt like it was on wires. And Maxi.
Oh, I can't get over it. I can't get over it.
Yeah.
It was like, when I just saw her begin to, I was like, this is what I love, watching a queen who was a drag queen before Drag Race on the show, because
she's literally
knows
double
how to
et
lip
cetera's
sync.
age.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. And she just, it's like she's embodying the song. Like, it's like she's singing it, and it means, and it's like the most emotional performance of her life. It's just, and it's just a delight. Like, my heart was just like pounding out of my chest watching her perform.
It felt like the first time I've seen a drag queen.
It occurred to me watching it.
Like, it felt like the first time I've seen a drag queen again, you know? It was like instantly back there.
Yeah. It occurred to me while we were watching it in the room. I suddenly went, because I know, like, I lived in Sydney for a long time, and she's one of the queens of Sydney. She's like the kind of fame that you are when you're a famous drag queen in a city, that is this quite odd fame where you're very famous to a very specific group of people. And it's not just gays, it's gays that go out. Do you know what I mean? Like, so you have this kind of following where you have these, maybe in your life, like if you work a few clubs, you have like 4 places where you are worshipped. And then you take off your wig and out in the world, you're like a regular person. And then you become, like, it's that, always fascinated me, that kind of armor of drag thing. And it occurred to me when we were watching it, she probably performed this, like, when it came out, like this, when she probably would have been a baby drag because this song's maybe like 20 years old, and she would have started drag when she's about 20. So it's just interesting to me that you could be, and then when it came on, she must have been like, she's like, well, I fucking got this.
I know. She's like, I've got it. I've done this one for years. And then, and an absolute power move, has a microphone.
The microphone coming out of her sleeve.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so good. I can't believe no one's done it in like 50 million years of Drag Race. No one's done it. It's so good.
Yeah.
And it's almost like this statement of like, this is how I perform. Like, she's like, this is how we do it. Like, and I was like, yes, go off. I love it.
It felt to me like the Latrice and, is it?
It's Kenya Michaels.
Kenya Michaels. I was about to say Davenport. Different family. Yeah, but it is like a similar vibe of like, here is old school of like, I'm going to hit every syllable of the lip sync because this is a lip sync for your life. It's not a dance for your life. It's not a splits for your life. And in a club, yes, sometimes, like, I don't know. Have you ever been at a drag show before and someone just slam their pussy into the ground, which is something I will never feel comfortable saying. And then someone will come out and do a ballad, and watching a bunch of high as fuck twinks start just getting watery-eyed from like usually a bigger queen belting out a I don't know what's like an exact
this is me from The Greatest Showman,
and I'm telling And I'm telling you, is the big one. I feel like just what like watching, and that's what it felt like in the room. Of like I love etc. I think she is such a for a 22-year-old. It is frightening how together I'm only
honestly
31.
the biggest shock.
I'm 31 and I felt like out of date. Like
that was the biggest shock of the episode for me was finding out that they're 22. I felt disgusting.
Yeah,
they're
it was
so
a
talented
jolt
to be 22. I know. I was like, ah!
I feel
and
dead.
She's so laser sighted. Yeah. And like she's already so clear on who she is and what she wants to do, and knowing that that's also going to keep developing is like really like when I was 22, I was a nightmare. I was like a mess.
I was vermin.
I didn't care about anyone.
I had just come out.
Yeah.
I don't think Speaking of etc., we're going to now chat with them on this very podcast. So, Rhys, because we don't want to overload our internet, we're going to thank you very much for coming and joining us digitally online.
Please, all our
You're in
listeners,
Canada
follow
right
Rhys,
now.
but don't give him any feedback on the show.
Yeah, just compliments.
Please don't
And that's
cancel
a rule
me, guys.
It's a rule for everyone. Strictly just compliments.
Yeah, thank you. Bye, boys. I'm a big fan of the podcast.
Oh, thanks, Rhys. Thanks for listening.
Rhys.
Thanks for being here.
Hello. How are you?
We are all in different cities right now.
Oh,
what city are you in, etc.?
I'm in Sydney. I'm in Sydney, Australia right now, and I'm putting on an eyebrow. That's my mission while we do this podcast. I'm sure you're aware of what all the other girls have done before this, but when Susan sent me the press schedule for today, I was very, very grateful that the first 5 interviews are audio only, so I didn't have to wake up at 4 a.m.
Yeah, that's good.
We've seen the full gamut of makeup levels of queens. Like Jojo was pretty early. Art Simone was like complete.
Oh yeah, well she's a Virgo. She's like she'd get into drag at midnight and just go through the rest of her life like that. She doesn't care. She'll stay in drag for years.
What's your star sign?
I'm a Pisces. So
our producer also a Pisces, and she's absolutely raving.
I just like to think about getting in drag. I like to think about the thought of getting into drag until it's just almost too late to start, and then I begin.
Etc. We were just talking before we brought you on that we cannot get over that you're 22 years old. Like, it's truly mad.
That was the shock of the episode for me, was finding out your age and that you're 22. How long have you been doing drag for?
I've been doing drag for it would be 4 or 5 years now since I first put on makeup, you know.
So 17.
17, yeah. I moved to Sydney when I was 17, and I started doing drag because I had no friends up here, and I'd moved from Canberra, and I was doing uni and had no one really up here that I connected to, and I was like, well, I should go out to clubs and meet people. And I thought, well, if I start doing drag, I can get in without, having an ID, and I can, just meet people because other people will be in drag. And that's how it kind of started,
Wow. I love that. That's so you're just into that from such a young age. And do you look back on that like early drag that you were doing and you were like embarrassed, or you're kind of proud of it? Because I feel like any kind of drag that you do when you're like essentially a child, you're just like, I'm just always like in awe of like the kind of courage and bravery and sort of artistic sort of enlightenment that individual has.
Well, it was interesting because when I started drag, it definitely wasn't something that I was like, oh, I'm going to do this for a career, I was actually like, oh, this is just a bit of fun. Like, it honestly was just for my own self-fulfillment and my own like queer little awakening. And then as people started offering to pay me money for it, I was like, oh,
you're like, whoops, I'm too good at this.
I can use this to pay my rent. But I mean, a big part of it, like, I never put on makeup until I moved to Sydney. I never touched makeup. I never put on a pair of heels. It was like I moved to Sydney and I went to my first Mardi Gras when I was 17 up here, and I saw like drag queens in real life, and it was almost like there was like a electrified flick switch moment, and it all kind of happened from there. It really was like I had an epiphany. I was Archimedes in the bathtub, and I was like, I have to cross-dress now.
Because that seems like, I always sort of take into consideration the drag artists' like looks when they're not in drag, like just their confessional looks and their workroom looks, because I feel like it gives you an insight as to who that person is as an individual. And absolutely, like you have the greatest style of everyone in the room. Always put together. And I feel like you would have the kind of wardrobe where it blurs from like stuff that you want to wear versus stuff you want to wear in drag, and you'd probably borrow from either side of the wardrobe. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes my out of drag wardrobe is more extravagant than my in drag wardrobe on some days. But it's always a different energy. I feel like when I'm out of drag, I'm channeling something that's a bit more I like to describe it as italic font and bold font. When I'm out of drag, I feel like I'm an italic version of myself, and when I'm in drag, I'm bold. And then when I'm at rest and I'm kind of not presenting at all, I'm kind of like just in the middle. I'm a normal font, sans serif, if you will.
Calibri.
Yeah. But I think it's really interesting when, like, obviously I'm non-binary, and when you're in that kind of trans space playing with gender, you kind of like, well, how am I going to present if I'm in drag all the time and people see me out of drag, and then they're like, are you still in drag? Are you not in drag? So I try to switch it up. I try to play with people's expectations of what they should see me in, and I enjoy doing that. I enjoy people being like, are you in drag right now? And I'm like, what do you think?
People are obsessed with having just like a clear line, aren't they? And it's like, what, they just need to. I like the idea that
to be honest, I'm obsessed with a clear line as well, but it depends what the line is. So,
how was your experience on the show? Because I felt like watching you leave. Like I felt like I could have watched you do the entire show. You just had what it takes to go all the way. And I felt like, but when you're watching you leave, it felt like you were pretty positive on your way out. You know, let's say on a scale of Simone to you, like, you know, you seemed like a sort of ray of light heading out of the workroom. Can you tell me about your experience on the show?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, when they rang me, I thought it was a prank call. I was like, there's no way that anyone's going to want me on Drag Race. Number one, because I'm too young. No, I was like, I'm so young. I've been doing it for 4 years. You know, this industry is full of titans and legends who have been doing, you know, for 20 years, slogging away. And it's like, they're the people I expected would get the opportunity first if Drag Race ever came. Right. You know how the first seasons of the American one, they had people like Detox and Alyssa and all of these like legends of the American drag scene. And I was like, oh, obviously the Australian Drag Race will pick off those people first, you know? Right. Pick off the Vanities and the Mini Coopers and the Dallas Delaforces and all of these people that have built drag in this country over the past few decades. So when they approached me, I was like, wow, this is really special. Obviously they're out of their minds, but sure, I'll go along with it. And then when they cast me and I got to go along, I think it was so much of a fever dream that I kind of, when I arrived in New Zealand to start quarantining, I kind of blacked out. And then when Rue eliminated me, I came to, and I was kind of like, well, that was a wonderful little fever dream. And now I'm back in reality. I can appreciate it for what it was. I got an opportunity to showcase my drag to the world that otherwise I would not have had. I got an opportunity for self-growth and self-development and betterment. And I got an opportunity to cross-dress on TV for people to relate to. I think that's a really important thing. Like, at the end of the day, no matter what people say about Drag Race and about the format and everything like that, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, something like this would not exist on mainstream television. And so to have this content going out across the world, and people like I was at Bunnings the other day. I'm not sure if you have that in
We have it. We love it. Yeah. We're all about it.
We love it.
Yeah. So I was at Bunnings the other day, and just random couples were coming up to me being like, "Oh my God, we love you on the show." You know, just Susan and her husband Darren were coming up to me and being like, "We love you on the show," and that for me is really interesting.
My mum's a fan. My mum's a fan of yours, etc. She texts me her reviews. She loves you.
Oh, that's so sweet. That's so sweet. Is your mum a Susan or a Darren?
She's more of a Susan, I'd say.
She's more of a Susan. My mum's more of a Darren.
Oh, nice. I will say as well, you're talking about it should be the stalwarts, but I'm like, it's so important to have a voice like yours on the show because you are reflecting the current state of drag in Australasia right now. And I thought you were so good at articulating who you were on the show and so clear. what was your? I'm not segueing into a question that relates to that. I'm just complimenting you. But what was?
Thank you. I'll take it if I have to.
What was the challenge you were most looking forward to on the show? Did you get to do the one you were most looking forward to?
No, the one I was most looking forward to was the makeover challenge.
No!
Missed out by 1 week, and I reckon Rue knew it, the sneaky bugger. He knew it. He said, etc. wants to do this one. I love putting people in drag. Like, I love it. I used to work as a makeup artist at Napoleon Purdy's, and I used to love getting the little old ladies coming in for their daughter's wedding, or getting the girls coming in for their high school formal, and they'd sit down and they'd be like, oh, I don't really wear makeup. And I'm like, honey, I'm about to beat your face to oblivion, bitch. And I just snatch these people who have never worn makeup before. And there's something really special about putting someone through that process of transformation for the first time.
They want a nude lip for their formal, and you're gluing down their eyebrows.
Yeah. I'm like, nude lip, how about a stacked 301 for your nerve? To be honest, I would have loved to have done that. I had a really cute, little Vivienne Westwood inspired, bow look that I was going to put them in, with a cute little, stacked hot pink wig. It would have been super, 90s supermodel fashion moment. And I think no matter what rugby player I would have gotten for that, I could have made it work, because I love helping people find their inner beauty, no matter how that looks like. It's not about making everyone look super, super girly all the time. It's just about making them feel beautiful.
What's your experience been like watching because there's one experience to kind of be on the show, and you got these big long days, you're in drag, you're kind of coming to terms with the idea that you're in front of RuPaul and Michelle, and you're being judged on your drag. But then there's the other experience of kind of watching the show back that you've been on, and the kind of edited down hour-long episode. What's your experience been like watching yourself in drag?
Well, to be honest, it's interesting. That's it. That's my comment. It's interesting.
Amazing. Thank you so much for chatting to us today.
There's pros and cons. Obviously, you watch yourself back and you go, oh, shit, shouldn't have said that. Oh, shit, bloody looked terrible there. Oh, shit, I did that. And then there's bits you go, oh, that was unexpectedly nice. Or, oh, that was a nice moment. Or, oh, I'm glad I got to speak about that. So I think it is 100% a mixed bag. And it's interesting to look at yourself through, I suppose, the producer's eyes, someone else's eyes, people that aren't necessarily you. You have your own insecurities. You have your own things. You're like, oh, my God, don't shoot me from that way. My nose looks bizarre. Or, you're just like, you've got these hang-ups that you've had your whole life.
Yes.
I think the cast and I were talking. This was the first time that we'd all seen it ourselves from the perspective of everyone else in the world. So it was a little bit confronting, And a lot of people online, they've called me, a bitch and a bully, and said that I'm mean and blah, blah, blah. And I think what they just, what they realized, and what I realized, is I'm just brutally honest, to the point of that it comes across that I'm nasty. But at the end of the day, on set, it wasn't, no one was like, oh my God, etc., you're being so nasty. They were just like, yeah, she tells her opinion exactly how she thinks it. She says it to your face, and she won't hold back. And I think watching it back, I was like, yeah, I probably do that a little bit more than people ask me to be honest.
Sometimes that's a good thing. One, it's reality TV.
Great for
so
TV.
You need that television. And then you've got yourself kind of holding that conversation with Scarlett in such a, honest and frank way, and in a way that it's great. It's great to have that conversation on television. I felt like you had that conversation. You also had the conversation around gender identity. I felt like you were always tackling these huge conversations in the workroom. So you must be really I'm grateful to have you on the show to have those conversations. I thought you delivered them so well.
Well, look, it was, to be honest, when I'm there, I was interacting as I would interact with anyone.
Yeah.
I was backstage. My job here in Sydney, my main job is I'm the entertainment manager at the Imperial Hotel, which is, where they film Priscilla. So I book all the queens there. I put all the shows together. I run that venue. So I was going into there, I suppose, with a mindset of well, these are all queens that I could potentially employ. And I think because that's just how I operate day to day. I work with drag queens all the time, and I'm their boss. So walking into that room, I was like, well, I'm not going to alter too much about myself. And I probably treated people a bit too much like I walked in there and I had to be fully confident because as the youngest cast member, as someone who was trans in a room full of much older, mostly men, like male identifying people, like it was a position where like I would have been so intimidated to walk in there and not be fully confident. So I had to be like delusionally confident to be able to do that competition. And I think no one can go on Drag Race unless they think they are the hottest shit known to Earth. Otherwise they fall apart.
Oh, and it's weird to watch it on that show because we're so used to just like only confidence and then like a crack of insecurity when someone doesn't do well in a challenge and then like in the next week like back up like as they walk back into the workroom being like I'm feeling amazing again. So yeah, I mean obviously it's what the show requires of you. What's coming up next for you in terms of, you know, this is a huge chapter of your life which is like not over but like in terms of being on the show. And so you're obviously
working at the Imperial Hotel.
Yeah, but that's just a side gig. That's just something that takes up my spare moments. I this morning actually just literally 2 hours ago dropped my debut single.
Where can we find this?
At the moment it's on YouTube. I dropped a music video with it. It's called Flush. Okay. It has a lot of toilet metaphors, as my elimination episode, had some of those themes as well.
Right.
And yeah, they'll be released on Spotify and Apple Music later this week. But for now, it's on YouTube, and the music video is so fun. I got some of my favorite drag artists here in Sydney. Beautiful, alternative, crazy, trans, AFAB, beautiful, just amazing artists that I work with all the time. And they're all in a video with me, and we're just celebrating, I suppose, the filthy, kooky drag that I grew up doing in Sydney, and what makes it marvelous.
Gorgeous.
What a delight to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
And also, I'm so excited to watch this music video, and I'm just telling everyone now to like finish this podcast and go straight there and soak it up because I'm sure it's going to be great. An honor talking to you. You're amazing on the show, and I can't wait to keep tracking your journey beyond the show because truly an inspiring drag artist.
And you've got 100 years left in your life because you're a tiny baby.
And you're literally 10 years old. So amazing.
By the time that I'm 90, the cybernetic advances in technology, I'll have robot limbs. I'll have robot eyelashes. Yeah. I'll just be flying to the moon on robot shoes.
You'll be walking
You'll be competing on
season.
You'll be competing on All Stars against robots.
Yeah, All Stars.
I don't know about these robot queens. Oh, thanks so much. Lovely chatting to you.
Oh, so lovely chatting to you. Thank you so much.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to Drag Race Down Under the Covers with me and Chris. Chris, you had a nice time. You're coming back from Christchurch now.
Yeah, I just want to thank Michael Bow and Little Andromeda for letting me record here. And can't wait to be IRL with you in the studio again, Eli.
Can't wait. Thanks to Tina.
I missed your smell.
Oh, yeah. And I did rush here straight from the shower, so I am fresh. But we've only got 3 more episodes. Can't wait to dig into them. Can't wait to see these rugby players put into drag. Please rate and review the podcast. Subscribe. Tell your friends. Tell your friends about it.
And thanks so much for listening. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Kia ora, I'm Alex Casey, Senior Writer at The Spin-Off. We wouldn't exist without the ongoing support of our generous members. If you're able to, you can make a donation at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
Kia ora, this is Toby Manhire, here to urge you to tune in to Gone by Lunchtime, a podcast with me, Annabelle Lee Mather and Ben Thomas, tackling the world of New Zealand politics, from policy to polling, from scandal to psychodrama. Listen to Gone by Lunchtime, brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network, wherever good pods are sold.
The Spin-Off Podcast Network.